Hey everyone, Steven here, and welcome to my little library of horrors. So, a bit of an impromptu upload this week. I originally wasn't planning on uploading anything because if you hadn't seen my last community post, I had a root canal done on Wednesday, so that was a lot of fun. I figured I wasn't going to be able to talk for at least a day or two. I've never had one done before, so I have a huge dental phobia, so uh, it was something for sure, a lot. It was a lot worse in my head than it actually turned out to be, but um, it's been something that's kind of followed me in my entire life, and something that I still work on to try and overcome. Because while it's terrifying, it's something that ultimately is the best for me. I'll even show you guys what I mean here. When I was pretty much going through almost all of my 20s, I had this right here. I'll get it as best as I can. It's an old picture of me there. I'll see. But if you can tell, yeah, I had a big cavity on my front tooth. It effectively ruined my self-confidence. I never would smile, at least not with my teeth showing. Growing up within my teenage years, anytime I had a cavity, I just told them, nope, yank it, get it out of there. And it made me really depressed afterwards, so it's always been a big regret. So now that I've gotten that done, I feel much better. I'm really happy I was able to save my tooth and everything. But it really kind of made me reminisce on, how terrifying things can ultimately be good for us. Facing our fears ultimately leads us to bettering ourselves. So it kind of made me reminisce on some horror books that ultimately changed the path of my life and sculpted who I am today. So I kind of want to just go over 5 horror books that deeply impacted my life. So yeah, before I get started on the video though, I do ask that you drop a quick like on it. It helps push the video out into the algorithm and helps the channel grow. We're only 5 likes away from my last video to get the story that I was lost in Witch Woods for a night as a child. So I really want to upload that for you guys. It's a fantastic and fun story. So if you haven't checked out my latest review, go ahead and check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, and leave a like on it. Once we hit 20, we'll go ahead and upload that video. But anyway, let's get started. So the first book that ultimately impacted me is It by Stephen King. So, much like a lot of us horror readers, Stephen King has ultimately impacted my reading habits and overall what I enjoy as a person. So I originally saw the movie It back when I was probably 9 or 10. I was at my cousin's house, and we were going through his father's VHS tapes in the basement when we saw It. And we were like, we loved Halloween as a kid, so we're like, let's check this out. So we popped it in, and obviously the scene where Georgie gets bitten in the sewer played, and that effectively traumatized me all throughout my childhood, my teenage years, even into my 20s. Like, I couldn't even look at the cover of the movie without instant panic, like literal panic. There was this one time when I went to Salem, Massachusetts, with my family, and they had this awesome horror wax museum. And sure enough, as soon as you take that first corner, big wax statue of Pennywise. I don't think I've ever screamed so loud in my life, before or since. So I just remember one day just being really tired of it. I was like, it's a movie. I can't be this terrified of that. So I picked up a cheap copy on Amazon and just started to read the book. I thought, if I can get through the book, maybe it'll help me get through the movie. And what I was really, I guess, unprepared for was just how much it would impact my life. There's a scene in here where I believe it's Richie, where I think it's the first time he encounters Pennywise, where he turns into a werewolf or something like that. But It's also been like almost 15 years since I've read the book. But there was a certain passage in it that Richie explains that his ultimate fear was becoming an adult. You know, all the responsibilities, the seeming lack of freedom and fun, everything is just stressful and things like that. That was something that very much weighed heavily on me throughout my entire life. You know, I always believed that when you became an adult, that was the end of it. You know, you couldn't have fun anymore. You had to worry about getting a good job and paying bills and just, you know, setting aside your dreams, you know. So it was just something that I actively avoided my entire life, honestly. Like, I did everything I could not to have adult responsibilities. And, but then there was that passage I read during it where King explains it perfectly, that you don't just wake up one day and boom, there's an adult staring back at you. It gradually, the child in you gradually deflates, like air out of a tire. You know, you start to notice you have less energy and you have different tastes and things and stuff like that. And, you know, while it's not some big bang, one day you look in the mirror and there's an old man staring back at you. And, you know, it was just a passage that really spoke to me, like someone understood the fear that engulfed me with growing up, you know. He just explained it so perfectly in a way I could never do it, that it was really like just a time in my life that I needed to hear that. And it was amazing. It really was. So yeah, I eventually did finish the book, which ultimately led to me watching the movie and loving Tim Curry's performance and even being able to laugh at some scenes. And not only that, I literally have Pennywise tattooed on me here. Like, that's how much the book genuinely impacted me as a person. So, while I have branched off a lot from Stephen King since my mid-20s, I will always point to it as being sort of the catalyst into the adult I am today. So the next book that genuinely impacted my life is The Troop by Nick Cutter. So, ultimately what made me pick this up was the little blurb by King here that says, "The Troop scared the hell out of me and I couldn't put it down. This is old school horror at its best." So, after, like I said, reading it, I was devouring King's work, all of his early stuff. Like, I went on to Carrie, then Christine and Cujo and things like that. And, but after I had started going through some of his classics and getting on to the much later works like Dreamcatcher and Rose Madder and stuff like that, I was starting to get a little burnt out, to be totally honest. I was like, you know, his work's becoming a little predictable. I'm familiar with how he, you know, creates his characters, his settings, what kind of plot twist to expect. So I wanted to see what else was out there as far as horror was. So I just did a quick Google search and was like, you know, top 10 scariest books of whatever. And the first book that really caught my eye was The Troop. I loved the title. The cover, while very simple, instantly caught my eye. And like I said, the blurb from King instantly sold me. You know, King was pretty much all I had known after taking such a long break from reading, that how could you go wrong? You know, the guy whose work you love is recommending this book, so I picked it up. So I love The Troop. I think it's such an amazing horror story that is very much in the vein of Carrie as far as how it's told, but the characters are so awesomely fleshed out. The atmosphere is dark and brooding. The story is terrifying. There are scenes that have literally made me squirm in my skin. our antagonist, Shelley, is still, to this day, one of the most disturbing antagonists I've ever come across in a book. And I've read a lot of, pretty heinous characters, but very few come close to what Shelley does in this book. So I guess it really opened my eyes to how much talent was out there within the horror genre. It showed me that there was so much more out there than King that is just as good, if not better than King. And that's what made me this book made me branch out even further to find Robert McCammon and Paul Tremblay and Jack Ketchum and all these other amazing authors that I otherwise never would have even bothered with had I not decided to branch out from King's work and pick up The Troop. So yeah, if you haven't read The Troop, I highly recommend checking this out. This is still probably one of my top 10 horror books ever. Cutter is a fantastic writer, so yeah, definitely check this out if you haven't. I think I'm actually overdue for a reread for this. I'm dying to review this for you guys, so maybe soon. It is set at the end of summer. Well, middle of summer or whatever. But hey, we'll see. Let's see. So the next book that really impacted my life is Swan Song by Robert McCammon. So I picked up Swan Song at a very difficult time in my life. My wife and I had just found out we were pregnant with our second child, and we had to move out of the apartment we were living in because we just wouldn't be able to afford 2 children with us, an apartment, and cars, and everything else. So it was really tough to kind of admit that failure, and having to move back in with my parents, and having 2 children as well. And I was going through a rough time. I had quit my job at the time to go back to a job that I previously really enjoyed that didn't really pay well, but that job was the reason I was able to read Swan Song by Robert McCammon. I had just finished reading Stephen King's The Stand and wanted more like it, so when I had done a little research to see what was like it, that's when Swan Song showed up. And I listened to the audiobook while at work, and it took me away from everything then and there. It made me forget all of the failures that I was going through, and gave me hope that, even through the end of the world, the complete brink of human extinction, there's always hope. Swan never gave up hope in the book, and, it made me realize that I can't either. Yeah, stuff is bad right now, but that doesn't mean things can't get better in the future. And, looking back almost 10 years later from now, I have a home library, I get to be a stay-at-home parent, and things are going really well. I mean, not perfect, nobody's life is perfect. We all have our issues, but, this really taught me to have hope in extremely difficult times in my life. So I'm extremely thankful for this book. Not only for that, but it introduced me to my absolute favorite author ever, Robert McCammon. I thought it would be impossible for King to be dethroned as my favorite author when, I was reigniting my reading journey. But after, like I said, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Reading Swan Song here just instantly changed it. I was like, wow, this guy is brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. So I think right after this, I read Boy's Life, then Mine, and it just instantly cemented McCammon as my favorite writer. He still is. I love every work I shouldn't say I've loved every work I've read by him. I have loved 99% of every book I've read by him. The only one I super didn't enjoy was Mystery Walk, but I have a full review on my channel on that if you guys want to go check that out as to why I didn't hate it, but didn't love it. But Again, another book I really recommend checking out if you're into post-apocalyptic novels. Check out Swan Song. I know there's constantly a debate of Stan versus Swan Song. My vote's for Swan Song. So the next book that greatly impacted me is Night of the Living Dummy by R.L. Stine. Classic cover, very menacing. So, I originally started my Goosebumps journey back in 5th grade when I was going grocery shopping with my mother, and as we were passing by the bookshelves, I just happened to glance and notice Welcome to Dead House. And I was like, oh, that seems super cool. So I picked that up and instantly fell in love with it, and Goosebumps, much like many other 90s kids, was my doorway into horror and reading. So this one sticks out to me because I remember when I got it, when I got home that day, I instantly went to my room, I shut myself in my closet, turned on a flashlight, and I read it in one sitting. And I remember being so terrified and engrossed in the story. Like, I remember my hands sweating and my breath getting short. And when I finished, I came out of my closet and no one was home. Like, my parents were gone. My brother wasn't home. So it just really added this element of fear after finishing the story. And later that night, when I went to bed and I went to sleep, it was the first time I had ever had a nightmare from a book. And I still, all these years later, vividly remember this dream. I was in the old house that I lived in at the time. My parents had lived in an apartment, and that's where I had grown up for about 10 years. But we were in there. I walked into my parents' room, and Slappy was sitting on the end of their bed. And I remember just being instantly frozen for a second, but something made me walk towards him. And that's when the bedroom door shut behind me, and the walls started to close in on me. And Slappy just sat there and laughed, and I panicked and tried to get the door open, push on the walls and everything. And all the while, all I can hear is Slappy's laugh. Just throughout the whole dream. And I woke up and I was just like, wow, whoa. But obviously I was horrified, but it was the first time that I made the correlation that horror can be fun. Like, it was fun being scared. You know, I guess it's hard to explain. I don't really know why I felt this exhilaration when I woke up that, you know, I was still alive. I guess that makes sense, you know, when you're having a dream where you think you're literally about to get crushed and you wake up to realize you're okay. Of course that's exhilarating. But it just made me crave more. I wanted more excitement, more fear. And, you know, this book made me realize that you can have all of that excitement and danger without actually putting your life on the line. So it was this nice adrenaline rush. And it was just a huge gateway into my reading journey in my early years. So this will always be a book I hold near and dear to my heart. So last but absolutely not least, the book that really genuinely impacted me a lot in my life is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. This is actually a copy I have from high school. I bought this, I think it was from the bookstore Borders back in the day. So, or maybe it was Wendell's Books, I can't remember. But yeah, I discovered Poe very early on in my life. It was in the 4th grade. We were reading a big those big reading comprehension books that, you know, have a whole collection of different genres and school curriculum books and stuff like that. And We were reading this really boring story. I genuinely don't remember what it was or even what it was about, but it was just, I was very advanced in reading for my age at that point. So it was, it was a huge, it was just boring to me. It was just very boring. So I started to kind of flip through the book, through the pages, see what stories there were. And that's when I fell onto the illustration page of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. And it was very menacing. Like, it just instantly caught my attention, where it was dark and the doorway was open. There was the light and you could see the shadow that extended over to the man sleeping in his bed. And I was like, wow, what's this? So as my teacher was blathering on about whatever boring story we were reading, I was in the back reading The Telltale Heart. And it just completely engrossed me in the story. I remember it felt like I had found this secret that I wasn't supposed to know within a school curriculum. I was like, there's no way we're supposed to have this in our school book. Like, someone's getting murdered right now, and this guy's hiding him in the floor of his house. And I just remember being completely transported to that time and not noticing anything around me. I didn't hear a word my teacher said. I wasn't aware of any of my other classmates around me. I was so sucked into this story. And what genuinely really impacted me was it validated a lot of negative feelings I had. My parents worked a lot when I was a kid. They both worked for a shift, so my brother and I would often get left with a babysitter in the morning. Those people were very abusive. I was constantly called an idiot and stupid, basically made to feel terrible about myself, and that everything I did was wrong, and a lot of other stuff. So at a very young age, I had a lot of pent up rage and anger and confusion. And with Poe's story, I felt I was able to get that frustration out through the character that was committing these acts. I mean, as awful as it is to say out loud, like, it felt good that it felt like I had some kind of control in my life after feeling so powerless every day. It made me, it just got those feelings of wanting to hurt someone out. It made them go away. I really feel like this book prevented me from going to jail or hurting someone or even worse. Who knows? It gave me an outlet for the anger that I had, and it made me realize, I don't have to take my frustrations out on real people to express how I'm feeling. I can live this through other people. And, I'll forever be grateful for that, because it not only did it give me that relief that I needed, it gave me an escape from the reality that I was living at the time, the pure hell that I was in. It taught me books can be an escape from the reality we live in, that the horrible situations that we're going through are not unique to us. There's other people who understand these things go on, and that, it's okay to have these feelings that you have, but find a healthy way to express that. So that's why Edgar Allan Poe will always be a hero in my life. And The Telltale Heart will always be the number one horror story to me, because it made me who I am today. It gave me the life that I'm able to live today, because it showed me that, there's other ways to deal with horrible things happening in your life in that moment. So I will always be thankful to this book. But yeah, that's everything. That's 5 horror books that deeply impacted my life. So, yeah, that's going to be it for me today, everyone. I genuinely thank you so much for giving me your time and watching this video. And feel free to leave a comment down below telling me a horror book that impacted your life and how it did so. Maybe I'll check it out one day and review it on the channel. But until then, everyone, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And until next time, be nice to yourselves. Later, everyone.